I want to talk today about this word MCOM. You can't swing a dead cat here in this ham radio YouTube sphere without smacking a video on the topic of MCOM. Now, I'm a paramedic and I've worked in the emergency services for well over 20 years. And so I think I've got my finger on the pulse of emergency communications. I've got a good beat on what's necessary. And what I want to tell you today is that if you took a sampling of any random emergency services worker in your life, dispatcher, paramedic, EMT, firefighter, sheriff's deputy, police officer, emergency nurse or emergency doctor, all of these people, and you just ask them, hey, what is your opinion on MCOM? They would look at you and say, what? And if those people worked in Texas, they would look at you and say, do what? And that is because MCOM is not a word used in the professional emergency services. I'm not saying it's a bad word, but when you hear MCOM, it's usually from amateur radio folks who don't work in emergency services. Now, some of those people have great ideas, but sometimes you look at a YouTube channel that's set up totally surrounding the topic of MCOM, maybe one with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and they want to tell you exactly what you need to do MCOM and how to calm during an M. And so what I want to encourage everybody to do is to just look at the total context of those channels. Do they have any sort of communications experience during an emergency? And if not, do they do and say things which just don't quite make any sense?
Little Altoids first aid kit.
Now, I'll take good ideas from wherever I can find them. I just want to encourage people to sift through the information that they're receiving, because when you do have an emergency, that's not the time for feel-good YouTube fluff. We need tools that actually work. And so I want to talk about an example today of emergency communications in real life and how they look and how maybe they're not quite so sexy as a lot of YouTube videos want to make it look, where you're throwing antennas up in trees and making contacts with people like all the way across the country for some reason. So I have here my IRPG, my Incident Response Pocket Guide, and every wildland firefighter carries this because it's got all sorts of reference materials. And on the back we have the 10 standard firefighting orders. And it's said that every single one of these firefighting orders has a dead body attached to them, because when people die in the line of duty, we learn from it and we adapt and we make rules for ourselves so that we can stay safe in the future. And you would be surprised at how many of these firefighting orders have a communications focus. So let's just dive right in. We'll start with number 1, keep informed on fire weather conditions and forecasts. And that's really important because the weather can change quickly and that can cause fires to blow up and kill people. And so how does this actually look in real life? Well, it starts with just face-to-face communications during the morning briefing. The incident meteorologist will tell everybody what their weather forecast outlook is for that day. And then when we go into the field, there will be somebody, oftentimes, one of the lookouts perhaps, actually just doing weather readings once an hour. And they'll be checking things like the relative humidity and the temperature, and they'll calculate out the chance of ignition if a spark were to drop on the ground. And additionally, when weather does change really quickly, we'll get alerts in real time. I had a situation a few years ago on a fire north of Kellogg where the incident meteorologists, they knew we were in an ambulance, and so they said, look, we think there is going to be a thunderstorm cell forming over the spike camp at like 2 in the morning. If I call you on the radio, I want you to get in your ambulance and blast that siren, because we need to get everybody out of their tents and into their vehicles where there'll be a little bit of lightning protection. So I was like, okay, whatever, that's fine. So like 2 a.m. rolls around and I get the call on the radio, and then suddenly it sinks into me. I am about to wake up an entire fire camp full of tired, angry people with sore muscles who want nothing, who probably at that point would just take a lightning hit if they could just continue sleeping. And so I confirmed with that meteorologist like 4 times. Like, I was like, are you sure? Are you absolutely certain? I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. Are you positive? He's like, yes, sound the siren. get people into their vehicles and out of their tents. And so there you go. I did MCOM with an ambulance siren. Know what your fire is doing at all times and base all actions on current and expected behavior of the fire. Well, how do we do that? I don't always see the fire, right? I'm like back from the fire. So we have this thing called LCES, lookouts, communications, escape routes, safety zones. And that's actually number 4, right? Identify all those escape routes and safety zones. But part of that is posting lookouts. So when there's blind spots where you can't see what the fire's doing, you have somebody up on a mountain and their job is just to look out and let you know if there's danger approaching. And oftentimes they're the ones doing the hourly weather too. So how do they let us know? Well, they're not stringing an HF radio up in a tree, right? They're using a VHF radio. I think you're going to find that your just normal VHF, UHF communications with handhelds are going to provide much, much more utility in most emergencies than all of this focus on HF. And I love HF. I've used HF. Even in emergencies, I've used HF. The military still uses HF, even despite the fact that they've got this, wonderful, I'm sure, encrypted constellation of satellites. It's just not the main focus in emergency services in my world, and it never has been. And even when I went to Hurricane Katrina, you know what we used? We used cell phones. And I'm aware that they used HF some there, but take a look at any of the videos on Hurricane Helene. The things that I'm telling you are not going to be unique. I watched videos of people who were actually doing work in Hurricane Helene, and they used VHF radios, VHF and UHF handhelds. They did not need a whole lot of HF. So let's continue down the list here. We've got number 5 was post lookouts, right? We can move down to number 7, where it actually has the word communication in it. Look at that. Maintain prompt communications with your forces, your supervisor, and adjoining forces. And you'll be scanning not only what's going on in your division, but what's going on in other divisions, so that you know if maybe the division over, if the fire's blowing up, you get an early warning and you can make a decision accordingly. Number 8 and number 9, give clear instructions and be sure they're understood. And maintain control over your forces at all times. These are just so heavily communications driven. It would be impossible to separate out the communications aspect of this. And the last thing I want to talk about is the watch out situation number 7 here. Watch out situations are not hard rules so much as they are like things you just need to watch out for, because when you start stacking up these situations here on this list, when you've got multiple of these that you're flagging in your area, the risk to you and your crew goes up. So number 7, no communication link with crew members or supervisor. And that just sums it up better than anything I could possibly say, because if you don't have communication with your crew, your supervisor, with the lookout, with the people who can actually warn you when danger's approaching, that's when people die. So let me know what you think. Obviously, real life MCOM, emergency communications, is just not as sexy as you're ever going to see on YouTube. The sexy stuff gets the clicks. But you know what? If you actually want to have real skills that you can put to use, study some of these real life applications of emergency communications. Study those videos with the after action reports from Hurricane Helene and real emergencies and people who actually worked emergencies, even if they don't have a ton of experience. The people who were there, I'm always going to value their takeaways more than some fluff channel on YouTube.